The first 3 minutes is where you lose the majority of your audience. Will this episode deliver me value right away is what the listener is constantly assessing. And every second that value is delayed, the more antsy we get in this world of instant gratification. And I think I can go somewhere else and get the solutions to my problems easier.
Your podcast should be your most powerful business development tool, a trust and authority builder, and your content creation engine. Let's help your podcast help your business with the Story Trust Media Podcast. Here's your host, John Gehring.
I got some feedback from last episode that I want to address. Last week, I was talking all about the importance of getting right to the content with a guest and not going on about their background, asking them to catch everybody up on their life so far and fill us in on the last 40 years. No, get right into it by providing value as quickly as possible. And I did have some pushback on this. And I'm not surprised, and I even respect where that pushback is coming from. So I want to break down a pros and cons of getting right to the point and asking a question that gets right into it versus having a little jibber jabber up front, a little friendly banter. Now, this isn't going to change my position, so to speak, about how important I believe it is to get right to the point with a guest as soon as possible. But I will admit there is some potential to relax this a bit. All right. There is definitely some variability in the way you could go about this that could be successful. All right. So let me explain. You start a podcast with, say, a 30-second clip from a guest who delivers some awesome value. There's your first 30 seconds. Boom. Then you hit your intro bumper. This is the whatever show. All right, another ideally 15 seconds, but let's be honest, most of them drag on for at least 30. Now you're a minute in. Now the intro bumper introduces you as the host, right? Here's your host, Mary Smith. And Mary Smith comes on and says, "Hey, everybody, it's Mary Smith, and welcome to the Mary Smith Show, blah, blah, blah." And they start introducing the guest. "I'm so excited today to have this special guest on who's going to tell us about this and that." My point last week, usually your intro of the guest is too long, right? We don't want to know where Mary Smith's guest went to high school and their favorite extracurricular activity in high school and all the names to all the books that they've written and how many TED Talks they've given. We are not interested in their credentials as much as we're interested in what problem this guest can help me solve as the listener today on the Mary Smith Show. All right, so that was point number one. Point number two, what usually happens after a 1 to 2 minute intro, so now you're 2 to 3 minutes into the show, is we finally get to the point where Mary Smith says, "Hey, guest, welcome to the Mary Smith Show." And at this point, the guest is supposed to say, "Oh, hey, Mary, thank you so much for having me on, blah, blah, blah. I'm so excited for this conversation." How many podcasts have you heard that start that way? Maybe yours does. And that's okay. All right. I'm not here to judge you. I still work with podcasters who start that way all the time. Right. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. However, I am saying that the first 3 minutes is so important. The first 3 minutes is where you lose the majority of your audience. Will this episode deliver me value right away is what the listener is constantly assessing. And every second that value is delayed, the more antsy we get in this world of instant gratification. And I think I can go somewhere else and get the solutions to my problems easier. So the question at hand is, after going through Mary Smith's whole intro, should Mary Smith now ask the guest, "Hey, how are you today?" Or, "Hey, thanks for being on the show"? Or should Mary Smith say, "You've helped B2B business owners generate 3 times the amount of leads as their competitors. How have you done it?" Do we get right into the content? Or do we have a little bit of banter back and forth? Now, there are some pros and cons to each. Pros of having some banter back and forth. Certainly, it relaxes the guest more. Some podcasters I work with, maybe you on your own show, you've never even met the guest. Or you've had one 15-minute call just to audit the guest and make sure that, okay, this guest is okay for my audience. So you don't really know how they're going to react in this high-pressure moment of, let me ask you a difficult question right off the bat and let's get right to the meat of it. So it might be more comfortable for the guest and for the host to have a little bit of, "Hey, how's the weather down there in Atlanta? Okay, I can see where you're coming from there. And quite honestly, if the goal of your podcast isn't necessarily to maximize your audience growth and to keep listeners engaged the whole time, but just to have a good conversation and record it and put it out there in the world, so be it. That's definitely a pro. And some podcasters would argue that's going to loosen up the guest and they're going to deliver better value because they're looser. All right. Another potential pro is you're setting the tone for this podcast to be a casual conversation so that the listener knows what to expect. Maybe the Mary Smith show is all about authentic conversation, real talk with people who have been through traumatic experiences or whatever. You don't want to dive right in that case. Maybe. It just depends on how your show is going to be structured. Some of the cons, though, of having some of that banter up front and some of the pros of getting right to it, and this is what I would argue for, is that again, within those first 3 minutes, like I mentioned last week, the majority of your audience is going to tune out. The majority of your audience who doesn't stay with you till the end leaves within that first 3 minutes, which means if you can get people past the first 3 minutes, there's a really good chance that they're going to stay all the way till the end. That's a powerful statistic. And that informs a lot, doesn't it? It sounds drastic, but think about your own content consumption habits. How many podcast episodes do you start listening to and think, I'm really not feeling Mary Smith right now. I'm going to go back to Mel Robbins. She's pretty reliable. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I'm really, Lewis Howes. I'm not sure if I can make it through this 2-hour episode right now. I'm going to go to something a little shorter because he hasn't hooked me right away. It all comes down to those first couple of minutes. How much value can you deliver? Now, some of the best podcasters in the world do it both ways. So I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. Like I said, there's pros and cons. But I would encourage you, especially if you're a new podcaster starting out, competing with all of those other big, more established voices. If you want to get people to stay with you the entire episode, deliver value as soon as possible. And that doesn't mean that there's not room to have casual conversation, especially later on in the episode. But to start it with, hey, how you doing today? Versus getting right into the actual meat of the content, I believe is costing you audience members. I believe that firmly. And so I just want you to consider that, okay? I can go both ways with it. If you want to start the show with a quick, hey, so welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. And they say, hey, thanks for having me. And then you get right into the question. I'm not going to argue with that. It's not a bad way of going about it. Keeps it casual, keeps it very podcast-like. People expect that. Now, if you say, hey, thanks for being here, and they say, thanks for having me, I'm really excited for this conversation, and then you say something along the lines of, let's start, where'd you grow up? Okay, now I have a problem. But as long as you get into the content as soon as possible, as soon as what you deem to be realistically possible, I'm okay with it. So I want to relax what I said last week, maybe just a little bit. This is the beauty of podcasting. It's not a traditional broadcast where every single second matters. Every second is money wasted. I'm not trying to say that because I know the beauty of podcasting is that it can be a little bit more laid back. I'm just warning you that if you don't provide value to your audience as soon as possible out of the gate, you may be missing an opportunity to keep part of your audience who's looking for solutions to their problems as soon as possible. Let me know what you think about that. Because I know I stirred up a little something in a couple people last week who are very passionate about podcasting and the fact that you want to start every episode by making the guest feel comfortable and having an authentic conversation and all that. And I don't want to get rid of any of that. I don't want to say that's not valid. I'm just saying that you got to remember why you're there. Why you're there is if you're looking for your podcast to grow and be an asset for your business, why you're there is not just to sit around on a couple of couches and have a fun conversation with somebody. It's a nice benefit to it. But no, why you're there is to serve the audience and help the audience solve a problem that they have through the content that you can create. And ideally, in as efficient of a timetable as possible. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know. If you didn't enjoy it, let me know. Would love to hear your thoughts on podcasting and how you start podcast episodes with your guests.
Thanks for checking out the Story Trust Media podcast. Learn more about what Story Trust Media can do for your business and book a free consultation at storytrust.media.